So I'd like to introduce our guest speaker today, all the way from California on the West Coast. He's going to talk about building an advanced CERT program. Chad Fitzgerald is the Life, Safety, and Enforcement Manager for the City of Clovis. In his role, Mr. Fitzgerald is responsible for community preparedness efforts from training citizens in emergency response to emergency operations plan exercises and drills for city staff. In addition, Mr. Fitzgerald manages the Prevention Bureau, which ensures community development projects from residential to commercial are within California Fire Code and local standards. Mr. Fitzgerald serves as the fire department's public information officer, performs grant writing administration, and serves on the Clovis Emergency Response Team Board of Directors. One of Chad's key responsibilities is the continued maintenance of the business intelligence information for the department. This includes aggregating call information and GIS data to ensure operational compliance with adopted standards of coverage. As one of only 13 California agencies who has received accreditation through the Center for Public Safety Excellence, geospatial data and information tracking has played a key role in maintaining an accredited status and is instrumental in continuous quality improvement. Mr. Fitzgerald has a bachelor's degree in psychology from Fresno Pacific University with a minor in conflict and peacemaking and postgraduate work in administrative leadership. I'd like to introduce Mr. Fitzgerald and his program.
Thanks, Michael. I appreciate the opportunity to be here today. It's an honor to actually connect with people on the East Coast. Obviously, Connecticut is super involved and working hard to keep a program that's active, not just for the purpose of active, but for the purposes of resilience and keeping Connecticut safe. So again, it's an honor to be with everybody here, both in Connecticut and who've joined us across the state or nation. I'm going to go ahead, Michael, and I need to just start sharing my screen. So I'm trying to find where I can share. Oh, here it is. Share my screen. Bear with me, everybody. I am of that age where technology is starting to elude me. All right. During my presentation today, obviously, if you have any questions, by all means, please ask. I am not adverse to taking questions during the presentation, or if you want to post them in the chat, Michael can feed those to me. Let's talk about advanced CERT programming. I think one of the things that we all share is we start in one spot and we can see the benefits as well as the challenges of growing our CERT programs to meet a lot of needs. And before I get into some of the programming concerns and whatnot, I want to share with you the practical experience of what we went through, because it really is building a volunteer cadre, one volunteer at a time. Who are we? A lot of people, obviously, if you're not from California, you think we all live on the coast. We run around in bathing suits and are on the beach at all times. That's a lie. Clovis is a community in the middle of the state, dead center. Primarily an agrarian-based economy all around us. Our city itself is popping up on 125,000, covering 26 square miles. We are what would be considered an urban environment. Our department staff is actually now, in the next 2 weeks, we'll be up to 83 personnel. And we have 6 stations that respond throughout the community. And those 6 stations handle about 12,000 calls a year. Our CERT program itself started in 2006. I came over and I came through the fire service through the back door. I was hired from our personnel risk management division and started as the emergency manager. And CERT was the biggest concern that for the fire chief at the time when I got hired. Since that time, we're about 350 members graduated. For clarification, that does not mean I have 350 volunteers active all the time. We're just talking about community members who are those force multipliers throughout the community, should there be an event that requires, taking care of yourself, your family, and neighbors first. We have about 50 core active members. If your program is anything like ours, that has a ebb and flow to it. Right now, I would say there is a flow away, simply because the active group I see more often than not is about 15 to 20. We are established as a 501(c)(3), and I'll talk more about that. And honestly, we started as a simple train and retain. I need to change that from catch and release. It really is about, I'm sorry, we were train and release. We did not have the philosophy of building something out bigger. We wanted to just have that force multiplier within the community, kind of how CERT was designed. If you go back and you look at what Frank Borden started back in LA City years ago, that's what the intent was. The intent with CERT was to create a better prepared population. That's it. When we teach, I think too often we miss that point. We really get more involved in all these great things that CERT does, but I think it's important for us all as program managers, volunteers, and state CERT coordinators to remember that CERT at its core is about preparedness for the individuals, 72 hours, taking care of yourself, your family, and your neighbors. So we started there and we grew over time. Our volunteers, and my philosophy as our program manager for our program, is I'm more interested in quality of volunteer experiences and quality of output versus quantity. I think a lot of times we get caught into this idea, be it from our sponsoring agency or volunteers or maybe our local elected officials. What are the numbers? How many volunteers do you have? Certainly that has its place, but if we have a lot of numbers and not a lot of great outputs or volunteer experiences, that can be devaluing to the program and it can be devaluing to the individual members. And once the program starts to devalue, those are hard messages to counteract. So when I think of our volunteer programs and I think of what CERT volunteers do, again, it's quality versus numbers. And the stuff they do, it's got to be meaningful. I think a lot of you, if you're anything like myself, we've probably been faced with those times where somebody may come to you and say, well, you have volunteers, I need them to do this. Well, that's not what the volunteer program is for. We don't have volunteers to serve as a labor pool to do whatever the city or municipality or county is unable to fulfill. The work we have our volunteers perform needs to be meaningful, and honestly, it needs to be in alignment with what your CERT program is designed to do based on the community you serve. Again, with citizen volunteers, this idea of capitalizing on volunteer interest or innate skill sets, this is a point for me where I want us all to consider the idea of evaluating what skills do our volunteers bring to the table that we may not realize. I'll give you an example. I had a retired CHP officer who was a volunteer for me at one time. And when we put our support unit into place, which I'll talk more about later, he was instrumental in designing the driver's course, the testing, and keeping it in alignment with kind of what the vehicle standards and the California DMV expected from volunteers. So again, surveying what our volunteers are capable of, what their interest sets are, and finding out how do those align with the needs of the community that we serve. Citizen volunteers for us, and maybe for you, it can't just be about disasters. Our hazard profile where I live is low. People think that basically all of California sits on a fault line and we're going to drop into the ocean, and Nevada and Utah will suddenly be coastal communities. For us, it's low hazard. The biggest things that face us here are cold, heat, and flooding. And so when we think about the retention of our volunteers, we have to move beyond the disaster concept and think about other ways we can deploy them, but keeping it in alignment with community risk reduction and those things that CERT was designed to do. Another thing that you need to think of as you build out and do an advanced program, advanced programming shouldn't just be coming from an office of one. and it shouldn't necessarily be driven solely by the sponsoring agency. We need to do a better job of surveying what our community partnerships look like, be they NGO or non-government organizations, other volunteer agencies that exist, maybe other components of county or municipal government, and capitalizing on filling those gaps where it aligns with certain mission, form, and function. When we can have those effective partnerships, I think it relieves the burden from us as program managers or state CERT coordinators, and it allows a more comprehensive approach so that we're deploying in the most effective and efficient means possible without necessarily stepping in other programs' toes, if you will. So how did this all start for our advanced program? Because as I told you, my philosophy was I will train, we will get volunteers in the community, and I should say more citizens in the community, just prepared to take care of themselves, their families, and their neighbors for 72 hours, because that's what CERT was designed to do. Unfortunately or fortunately, depending upon one's view, that gentleman with the red arrow pointing at his lovely head, Bill Luke, came into my office one day and said, you know what? We need to do more. We need to be doing better. There's so much opportunity to be had here. We need to do a support unit. We should be doing public education. We should be doing traffic control. We should be doing senior citizen survey. I mean, he had a list of things he wanted to do. So he was my super volunteer. And unfortunately, at the time, that cloud above my head lasted for like 2 years. What just happened? Here I thought I had control. I was keeping things in alignment with what I thought was best for everyone. And I had to learn to not be the office of no. That didn't mean that I had to turn into the office of yes. What I turned into the office of is what's possible. And really, Bill Luke and his attitude and both his capacity was instrumental in looking at activities, community support, changing the course offerings and enhancing them in a way that was more beneficial, and kind of those department support roles for volunteers, which led to those 4 bullet points you see at the bottom. Is we broke down all of his ideas, and we said, okay, do we have the need to do the things you want? I can't do everything, and some of what you're asking for isn't necessarily aligned with what we do in the fire department as a sponsoring agency, but what we can do is we can do a support unit. In the support unit project being one where we have certain members going out doing response alongside of our firefighters to do firefighter rehab and on-scene support during active fires, doing improved exercises. Again, something we miss when we think of advanced programming is exercises that keep the tools sharp. It's not enough to just put on basic classes and hope for the best. We need to keep the tools in the toolbox that we've given them relevant to what we have as needs and what they're doing in the community. Obviously, when in my role as a program manager, being an office of one, but with staff that I had deployed in prevention, I needed assistance with administering this. And I think, again, let's capitalize and realize the value volunteers can play in helping administer the program. Now, obviously, that can come with some challenges depending upon if you have them accessing city facilities, giving them computers, equipment, and things like that. But I knew that administration of the program, if we're going to do all this, volunteer involvement needs to occur not just from the deployment side, but from the administrative side. And what I would want to caveat all that too is when we can engage volunteers in the design, form, and function, your buy-in and their understanding of what's possible goes to, again, making it the best value for the money possible. Getting them involved in the design early on helps them see both the challenges and the potentials, as opposed to you designing it and maybe forcing it down their throat or having it not be in alignment with some of the things they want to do. And obviously coming out of that, it was really a matter of containing my super volunteer. Again, I love Bill. Bill has since left and moved to Texas a few years ago. But containing Bill's enthusiasm and his desire towards this advanced concept was key to both keep us grounded in what Clovis Emergency Response Team form and function was, and to ensure that I didn't build something that was out of control and incapable of being supported by the sponsoring department. So that led us to evaluate, activities. When we go back to that list and we think about activities, well, what did that mean? Well, I wanted our activities and the things that we were involved with to have value and not just be simple handing out of, flyers and things like that. So we got involved in our Clovis Farmers Market. Um, this is an event that happens from every Friday night from May through October. So it's pretty extensive. We collaborated with the Chamber of Commerce as the sponsoring agency. And what we've been able to do is it started as having a booth with preparedness materials. And you can see there the picture in the middle where I've got a kid learning alongside of a CERT volunteer, kind of the pull, aim, squeeze, sweep. And while I have a child just working with the volunteer, I'm talking to the parents about, what are your steps that you're taking at home? Do you have a escape plan? Do you have a meeting point? So again, purposeful activity for those volunteers. It was public information regarding CERT, so it was part recruitment, part preparedness training in a very limited format. Because if you've ever been to a farmer's market, you're not going to lock yourself in a booth for anything longer than about 5 minutes. But that was an activity that they felt was important. So we have continued that. I will say, relative to farmers market, one of the feedback points that I had to be aware of is when volunteers are deployed, giving them that purposeful outcome that you were looking for. So I'll give you an example. The volunteers about 2 years ago, I took away the prop. It got to be unwieldy to be out there in the public. And I said, hey, just go forward. Let's do some recruitment. Let's, gather some names and phone numbers. And about 2 weeks later, I had a volunteer in my office just on fire, not literally. And the concern was, you haven't done enough to tell us what you want. And I, as the program manager, thought, no, I told you to go forth and recruit. Well, we need better defined goals and objectives, because what's happening out there when you're not around is volunteers are showing up at the booth. So-and-so walks down the street, gets their fresh fruits and vegetables, 3 corn dogs and 5 cinnamon rolls, and we never hear from them again. We need to know what you want. And I had to put in place the expectation. You need to get, every volunteer needs to get like 5 names, phone numbers, contacts that we can have so that we can reach out to them again. Again, giving them a goal and objective kept them locked into the activity we wanted. In addition, they felt that recruitment was no longer enough. They wanted to do something more practical. And so that event has now led to being a first aid booth at farmers markets. So CERT fulfills first aid booth staffing, which is, we have Band-Aids, we have just some simple first aid things that we can do there. And so that gives them an additional sense of purpose. Moving along, we've also gone into our downtown electrical parade to provide traffic control. This is one where we talk about, again, that collaboration. This was done in coordination with the police department. The children's downtown electrical parade, which happens during the holiday season, it required training in advance to the deployment. So when you think about your advanced programming, collaboration is important, but then also if it's an extension and outside the CERT scope, which there's now traffic control built into the CERT continuing education, who's going to do it? And how often will it be deployed? Because we don't want to overutilize that resource, but we have to provide the training consistent with the outcome that we're wanting. So we had great relationships with our police department, and CERT has been involved in that activity. Playground restoration. This is an odd one, and I want you to just think about your community needs and where opportunities that you don't normally think of might lie. We had in Clovis a situation where we had a little firebug going around and lighting off our playgrounds. Our playgrounds obviously heavy on the plastic. The material that sits on the ground isn't sand, it's recycled tires. That's for the purposes of safety if kids fall. So it all burns really well. So we had somebody that set off 3 playgrounds, and at the end of it all, we needed to get back in there and reinstall equipment and put down surfacing. What was interesting is in that moment, the city manager reached out and said, you know what, this shouldn't just be city staff. We can do a better job getting community members involved. How do you feel about your volunteers, your volunteers with CERT training participating in that? And so I surveyed the group and they're like, yeah, we would love to do that. But again, we will need training. And what's the connection to CERT? Why would we be asked to do that? And it was more along the lines of community resiliency. Parks and playgrounds play an important part in maintaining a vibrant community, and being out there as a CERT member, being able to take care of the after effects of fire, which we talk about. This was just, again, a unique opportunity. So they got training from our public utilities staff. And over the course of 2 weekends, they installed both the playground equipment and the surfacing material. Not something that is in CERT basic curriculum, not something that we normally think about as continuing education. So when you think of advanced programming, it is that, again, where are those opportunities we might normally think of, and doing collaboration, not just with the asking department or agency, but asking your volunteers if they would feel this was purposeful and valuable. Community support, again, those opportunities that exist that might not be that large disaster scale that we think about. In our case, our community over the summer months, which feels like they last from March to, I don't know, October, we can get in excess of 105 for days on end, sometimes even 110. So what we've done is we've coordinated, again, that partnership. Our senior center, which is a sister agency within the city, they have an active list of seniors who have registered and said, hey, I don't have family. I don't have a lot of, close relatives that might check on me. Can you give me a call, when it's, super hot, and just remind me to stay hydrated? Can you remind me to double check and just, check in on me? Is my AC working? So we have used our CERT volunteers to staff that phone bank, and not just the phone bank, but where we would have community members show up in the event that their cooling was unavailable, or they just needed somewhere to go during the high temperatures of the day. So they've made phone calls in excess of 160 citizens to ensure that they're cool. If they aren't, we coordinated with our traffic division, our transit division, I should say, and transit would then give them a free ride to the cooling center. So again, we could have used paid city staff to do this, but rather than redeploy city staff on something like this, it fit within the CERT mission. If we're talking about preparedness, which again is something I think we too often miss in CERT basic curriculum, this fits with that. This fits with mitigation. And so heat wave support was a big deal. Sandbagging. Here's an example. Our public utilities division, we had a severe rainfall within the city. And rather than putting public utilities staff on that, we needed to put our public utilities personnel out in the field, checking on our intersections, making sure pumps were in place, making sure intersections were clear, using their skills for that. So we did just-in-time training. And up in that upper photo, you see Jenny Owens, one of our volunteers, as well as other CERT members. They were given just-in-time training on how to fill the bags, and distributed, I should say, 1,600 bags over 2 nights. The assignment was filling, loading, distribution, and traffic control, all done with training, not just, hey, go do this. They got the training from public utilities personnel. They did the task over 2 nights, and it was very purposeful work in alignment with community needs and what CERT's intended to do. And finally, when we look at community support, I think a lot of us, and hopefully your program is one of them, the Sound the Alarm campaign that the Red Cross does is a phenomenal campaign that I think too often we miss to collaborate with. And that campaign specifically is designed to put smoke detectors up in at-risk residences. So I would encourage you, if you want to start doing advanced programming and volunteer utilization, the Sound the Alarm campaign, Red Cross does the community survey. They bring in the materials to both do the install, and they work right alongside you. They just ask for volunteer effort in changing out the smoke detectors that are in high-risk occupancies. Before we did that, we did our own smoke detector installation, and we did 800 in our mobile home parks. And that was a big deal simply because those represent our highest risk occupancies in the city. We have a population of seniors on fixed income. The mobile homes themselves are of a construction type that are more prone to going up quicker. And our volunteers that you see there in that bottom photo, again, that took about 2 months for us to get into all 800 units. We worked with the property managers on site, and they went in there and didn't just do smoke detector changes. They helped, look for those 2 ways out, do hazard reduction, talk about, hey, why is your space heater right next to your couch? All good stuff that, again, in alignment with the concept and overarching goals of CERT, but really on the preventative side, which is a passion for me because obviously I work in prevention. Department support. I mentioned the mass care. The mass care and shelter trailer. This was a situation where our community, the local chapter of the Red Cross, runs from, I don't know, it's further north than us and way further south than us. And within that service area, there are about 17 unincorporated communities that will absolutely need Red Cross resources way sooner than we would. But at the same time, our experience was then if they're going to need that resource and Red Cross isn't coming, what can we do? So the department purchased a mass care and shelter trailer. And what we designed it to do is have support for 200 in alignment with Red Cross standards. And so that trailer, they are responsible for. They did the design. They, made sure the right equipment was purchased. And so we've used that both for exercises as well as actual deployments. We had a wildfire adjacent to us about 3 years ago, and we put it on the ground with our volunteers to support the mountain communities that were evacuating down into the valley. But again, here's a situation where we looked at the community. What was the need, and how could CERT fit within the respective role? And that felt like, again, advancing the CERT program, and there's a list of the supplies, how the trailer was spec'd out. I put it on them. I didn't need to micromanage. They have incredible capacity. They just need, assistance in purchasing and coordinating what that looks like. With exercises for department support, advanced CERT programming, they will come out and they will work alongside firefighters doing rehab, supplies, things like that. And what's great about them working in coordination with the exercises the fire department already does is you establish some great working relationships. If you have a program and it's working within law, fire, or EMS, there can be times where those paid staff look with a skeptical eye at why or what our volunteers doing. And anytime we have the opportunity to exercise alongside them and get those interpersonal relationships established, that can go a long, long way towards what it would look like on scene, because we're building trust. we're building that name recognition and understanding of what our volunteers are capable of doing. And there's again, I look for that respect factor that comes both ways from the department support effort that our volunteers have put in. Support 41. This is the rehab unit that we use on scene for our firefighters. Initially, the vehicle you see there was a decommissioned ambulance. The horror story there was Bill Luke. One night at an exercise with another agency, just kind of circumvented chain of command, went and talked to the other fire chief, and somehow struck a deal that he told me about the next day, where we would get this unit for $1 as long as we provided hazmat training from Clovis Fire. Hopefully you're collectively laughing and realizing just how chaotic that made me feel in that moment. But again, instead of being the office of no, it's like, okay, Bill, first you were way outside scope, but let's see what we can do. Long story short, we did see a need from the fire chief. We were able to provide some training, and we bought this unit for a whopping $1 from Selma Fire Department. There was obviously the need to overhaul it, and we spec'd that out to have all kinds of equipment. There's backboards on there, pylons, cooling chairs, cooling neck towels. There were even sandals on it, so as survivors of fire, whether they be single family or multifamily, sometimes they leave without shoes. So we had sandals on there, teddy bears for kids, extra air bottles. Fortunately, that unit didn't require special licensure, but it did require defensive driving. And we put individuals, as I said, my retired CHP officer, who was a CERT member, designed that. And we made that their baby. There was a staffing program. There was a maintenance component to it. I'll share some of that with you in terms of documentation. But what I want you to keep in mind too is it started this way. It has significantly changed since then. That vehicle got to be a bit unwieldy, and as our community grew, the need for rehab evolved as well, but we'll talk more about that. Here's an example, just as an idea, from 2006 to 2025, what did we do? And these are kind of those benchmarks that we look for. And when we talk about advanced programming, it's important for us to consider capturing the data. My world lives around data. I find that it resonates, pretty charts and graphs resonate well with my city council, along with good volunteer experiences. But these are just some examples of things that we have tried to do to continue advanced programming, but within alignment of community needs. You'll see at the top on the right-hand side that Storm Ready certification. Again, talking about partnerships, the National Weather Service does Storm Ready community certification. Your local Bureau of the Weather Service, I would strongly encourage you to coordinate with them if you haven't done so already, particularly in your area. You have a large coastal community, so many of you may have already done this, but that Storm Ready certification was a great way to give CERT members some meaningful training and allow them to feel involved in, as a disaster unfolds, or as we have storms roll through that could create potential flood hazards. They became weather spotters. We were the first city in the valley to have done that. But I suspect that many of your agencies may do that already. Coordinating with your sponsoring agency on open house, public education events, all of those activities can be that advanced programming that keep people engaged and give them that purposeful work and develop the relationships you need with paid staff moving forward. This is where we spend a lot of our times, and what the purpose here is. You'll notice that CERT basic training, it's like 160 hours tops, and that was when we were doing like 3 classes a year. You see their deployment, their utilization was a lot of other places. So again, capture what you do with them. It gives them a sense of purpose. And this is something if you were to go to an elected official with, or a chief officer with, state CERT coordinators with, it gives them a sense that you know what you're doing. It gives you subject matter expertise and validity to expanding your CERT program beyond just a basic class. Because these are all needs that CERT volunteers fulfilled, public education being a huge one. So again, this is really more about capturing what you do with your program as it expands. Here's some things to consider. What community needs are advanced and CERT volunteers fulfilling? It's one thing, again, as I said before, to give them work, but it had better be purposeful and it had better be fulfilling for them to do. You know, if you're getting eyes rolling about, oh, Chad, really, we're gonna have to go do farmers market again. Even if the need is there, if a CERT member or your volunteers don't feel like it's, you know, purposeful for them, reconsider and reevaluate what it is that's holding them up, or if it's something that's, you know, legitimately worth doing. I already mentioned complementing effort versus duplication. We all live in a world where there's a lot of volunteer emergency response type agencies. Team Rubicon, the American Red Cross, the Southern Baptists, you name it, there are a lot of groups out there. Be careful when you look at advanced programming in evaluating, is what we're doing complementing what's already there? Because community relationships, the relationships we have with our stakeholders, if we start duplicating that effort, there can be some territorial issues, for lack of a better term. And so you just need to keep those types of things in mind. Uh, Super important is the training to fulfill that mission. Who's going to do it? Are they qualified? Are they certified? Are there state, local mandates or requirements that we need to take in order to fulfill the mission? And who would those come from? Where is it going to happen? You know, do we have the capacity to do these types of advanced programming? I'm fortunate where our agency has a lot of real estate and we have a lot of opportunities at our training center. Um, it's been easier to do here because I have the community support and have the departmental support. When, you know, too often we look at these advanced programming and advanced opportunities as a, okay, well, we're going to do this. Well, I can tell you locally, I have to be thinking about advanced programming not always being in the summer months, particularly if we're outside. It's brutal here. I can't always put volunteers out in the heat, or if it's the holiday season, you can put all the efforts into doing some of these activities, but if it interferes with their regular lives, that can be a real challenge. And again, I go back to our responsibilities as program managers, as state CERT coordinators. Our volunteers exist to help us, but they also have lives outside of us. So we need to be cognizant of that. And then obviously logistics. When you start expanding, that usually comes with some degree of fiscal commitment or equipment commitment. So will we have the availability of resources to pull off the mission, and will it be supported continually moving forward? And lastly, is it still CERT? Um, I would say that a lot of things I hear from other agencies and what they're doing, it's not still CERT, but but the efforts they're making are towards prevention and preparedness. And if that's a core value within the CERT program, then it still has merit. My point here, though, is just be careful with how far off center we become with using volunteers who have CERT training in roles that just may not necessarily fit. And obviously, don't let your program become defined by side tasking or this advanced programming. Always be able to get back to the core, because I think we lose sight of that. Other considerations, liability. We all work in different states. Um, in my case, the advanced programming where we had them involved in our support unit, that liability initially and still in the state of California, I don't get volunteer coverage just because it's a single family structure fire. That's not a disaster in the world of California. Um, and so not only that, but I had to tell my volunteers initially that while you're driving, you're covered for us. You have to have the training. Um, but that training, once you were done, there could still be some liability coverage for yourself. In other words, we would be protecting you in the event that you were affording care and somebody maybe filed a lawsuit. But if you were hurt on the job, you were going to have to file what's called a general liability claim. That was unacceptable to me because I came out of the risk management world, and it took us a couple years to expand and include volunteer coverage for our insurance. So there was a moment where our volunteers were kind of hanging out there for themselves. And so what I want you to do is before you go into some of this advanced programming, coordinate with your insurance, risk management division, however it looks in your state, and find out what'll happen if the volunteers are injured, what'll happen if the public is injured, vehicle coverage. These are all things we can get so eager to tackle a task, and we check all these boxes that it works, but the behind the scenes, this stuff needs to be done in advance. Obviously, review your background process as you expand program responsibilities. In our case, our volunteers are working with kids. I've got to do a background check. I also, since they're driving a city asset, I've got to put them in our Department of Motor Vehicles poll. So I get notified when our volunteers, if they're out and about, and if they get popped for DUI or anything like that happens, we get a notification. So again, those considerations really come down to we're deploying people. Who do we need to talk to behind the scenes to protect volunteers and those that we're serving in the line of duty? So after all this, you still want an advanced program? Well, that's great. Just remember, there's paperwork, file maintenance, budget impacts, all the consideration. I'm going to stop sharing. I'm going to pivot out to some paperwork just to give you an idea of what that looks like. So give me 1 second here. I'm going to share. We're going to go to here. Here's an example. Hopefully you all can still see this. This is our Clovis Emergency Response Team Code of Conduct. An odd little document, but representative of the many landmines that I have stepped on relative to volunteer management. This is stuff that, again, as we expand CERT and we're putting them out in public roles, we've got to put a boundary in place to ensure that we all know how to work with each other. Some of this has, like I said, come from some incredible bad decision making on my part. In particular, treating other team members and staff respectfully and treating others in the same manner you would like to be treated. One might think that that's common sense, but apparently that is not. I had a volunteer one time who we put them out on a fire department support exercise with our firefighters. And even though I had clearly told them what the expectation was for uniform, I had said, hey, wear, your black BDUs, your black shoes, closed-toed, red CERT shirts. Volunteer one got there before and was at the booth. Volunteer number two showed up and was not dressed appropriately. And without going into too many details about what that volunteer was wearing, I'll just say that volunteer number one, as the volunteer number two walked up, said, "My, don't we look like a whore?" So all that is to say, the things that you see here come from experience. And when we do advanced programming and you start to have less of a touch, or if they're deployed in a way where you're not the paid staff person on site, these types of documents, these types of things need to be in place just to shoot the warning shot over the bow of what is expected. The last piece on this one, I had a situation where you'll see also, please note, this was the latest edition. Clovis Emergency Response Team is not a daycare facility. I had volunteers bringing their kids to public education events or to other events that we would assign them. And it just created a real disconnect when we have kids there and we have a very focused, purposeful activity. We're trying to retain professionalism in the world of emergency response. And I've got kids running around kind of creating a disruption. So that's where that came from. Let's see here. Stop sharing that one. We'll share another document. If you do advanced programming, you may get into a position where you are doing, let's see here, logistics or job descriptions. So again, here's a spot where as we built our program, I needed volunteers to help assist in the administration. We came up with job descriptions. The paperwork increases the more advanced you do. And I don't mean that to say it has to be bureaucratic, but what you see here are very specific designs and guidelines so that we stay in our respective lanes. It makes more work though. So do you have the capacity to go down this path or have the volunteer capacity available to help assist you as you do this type of thing? Our personnel division was not happy with the design of these. I had to remove them because the personnel division at the time felt as if it was creating an employment relationship. By having a job description, there was the feeling in our jurisdiction, I'm not saying it's universal, that it created an employment relationship and expectation, which then called other legal processes into play. So again, zeal to do a job, zeal to do great things, but I had to check some other boxes. And this was a box that I had to really reevaluate because of the concern our personnel division and city attorney had. So yeah, just a couple of document things there. I have one more. This is an example when I talk about purposeful activity. This is an example of what we would kick out from our support unit deployment. So our volunteers would complete an after action report. I didn't want it at first, but they said, hey, we need it because it gives us, that benchmarking, if you will, of who was there, what did we do, how well did we do. Again, more paperwork, but certainly in alignment with advanced CERT programming. You just have to have the availability to do it. This is an example of the CERT document checklist we had at that time. Uniform policy, the certificate of completion, the emergency assistance unit orientation certificate, DMV reports, first responder, all of these things were what we felt were important if you're going to be that advanced CERT volunteer within the department. They all had a document number assigned, you can see here, and what that document was. So yeah, let me go back to my presentation. Sorry. There we go. So like I said, the paperwork piece is something to consider. The file maintenance, budget impacts, your staff time and capacity, and the remembering of you have now created expectations and you have to deliver. It all sounds fun and good at the beginning. It sounds great, but remember, you've now raised the bar. You're going to have to keep the bar raised both for your volunteers and for your sponsoring agency because you've created the expectation. Can you deliver? And will you be able to deliver over the long term based on the staffing you have available? 2019 hits. I have a new chief. My new chief comes in and says, you're going back to basics. And you may ask yourself, why? What happened? Your advanced programming? We still have it out there. But I had a lot of key paid staff members reassigned or resigned. I had somebody leave and we did not backfill that job. And my experience in the moment was my chief said, I'm tired of you being the cruise director, is how he titled it. Your job is not to sit here and make sure you have CERT potlucks and monthly meetings that turn into complaint sessions. I need you to readjust. I need you to reevaluate critical needs within the community, not just the fun stuff, which did in turn lead to some CERT volunteer frustration because they didn't get called to fires as often as they did because we hired a logistics clerk. Our logistics clerk jumps calls. He's on the radio, he's driving around all the time. And so my need for that larger ambulance type support unit suddenly changed. It's okay. Don't let yourself as a CERT program manager or a state CERT coordinator or wherever the program sits, when things have to flex, be the office of Semper Gumby, always flexible. It doesn't erode your value. It doesn't change who you are. You have to adapt just as much. So that change with this is all stuff that happened based on a chief change. The leadership team that I had was a sewing circle, for lack of a better term. It was a lot of complaining, a lot of just upsetness, and I was losing the capacity to manage it. Um, and we were starting to doing a lot of make work with respect to volunteer engagement with little measurable output. We were all over the board and I was triaging morale more than I was doing good in the community with the program. So we are still in back to basics mode. This upcoming budget cycle, I'll be adding a new position to my bureau, and I will be putting this individual in charge of our CERT program with the expectation is regrowing it, but back in alignment to community needs. How or why did it work, and will it continue to work even though I'm still in basics mode? We're going to have that strong leadership team again with volunteers that hold each other accountable respectfully and with specific outputs expected. My role as the life safety enforcement manager, again, I said it before, I've moved from being the office of no to the office of what's possible. Our community, probably similar to yours, has a strong sense of identity. So I capitalize on this, Clovis, the proud Clovis resident mentality that they have, and I think that is something they feed to me, and I feed back to them. That collaboration with local partnerships, you see them there. We have our Kiwanis Club, the county, Red Cross. We look for those opportunities to be creative in blur boundaries, but without making it duplicating or duplication of effort, because the duplication of effort then doesn't just blur the boundary, it starts to erode the value of those collaborations that we can have with our local partners. All right, that is the end of my presentation, but I am open to, oh wow, there's a lot of questions in the chat. So let me go through them one by one here. So this is from Bob. Bob asks, how do you track members' training, education, spreadsheets, NQS task books, etc.? I'll be honest with you, Bob, I use spreadsheets. I don't have a volunteer management software system that is off the shelf or from a vendor. We just use simple spreadsheets. Both for class evaluations and things that we do there. I can show you, I think I've got one. Here's an example of volunteer hours tracking. You can see here, here's the volunteer on the left. Here are the activities across the top, and then the hours that were dedicated towards that effort. Simple, nothing complicated working there. It's simple math, in terms of how the formulas work and whatnot. But that's what we used for that purpose. Judith, what was the Clovis CERT responsibilities in the MCI drill? So the mass casualty incident, we played two roles there, Judith. We played a role of putting survivors on the ground, so they would act as survivors or victims of the event. And the exercise, for those that did want to have moulage put on them, they were there to provide hydration, put up a 10 by 10, and just give firefighters a place to recover as they went through that evolution. Bob asked, what percentage of your active members go beyond CERT basic training and get qualified for advanced duties? I would say less than 5%. It is not a role that most people go into. And in particular, the support unit requires a level of training on the support unit with getting your DMV pulled, licensure, all that. It's less than 5%. Cheryl asks, do you find leaders resist these changes because they're kind of married to things that only some people enjoy, like directing traffic at fireworks or at a marathon, not really CERT stuff? Um, Honestly, I find that there's not too much resistance to the change. My volunteers right now, Cheryl, honestly, they enjoy, I've tried to hone it in. Like I said, I'm back to basics. So the expansive nature of what I do, or what my volunteers do, they love staffing first aid booths. And they have started to show less interest in traffic control, simply because the police department has their own volunteer cadre now that help with that. They want to do stuff that keeps them connected to the fire department. And so I don't have a lot of resistance these days because I've narrow banded what we do and really aligned it with stuff that I'm capable of managing, needs within the community, and what my volunteers enjoy doing. Heidi says, what would you suggest to help get our EMD to utilize us? That's a great question. I think Heidi, and I laugh because in Fresno County, where I live, the county is like, great, you guys go do what you want, but please don't bother us with CERT volunteers. I think the best thing for CERT utilization is making it, stop talking about it as utilizing us and saying, what can we do collaboratively? So change the nature of the conversation from an ask to a collaborative evaluation. They need to know, obviously, who CERT is. Maybe we haven't done a good job of explaining how volunteers can benefit. Maybe there's resistance due to the fact that paid staff might see it as job threatening, for lack of a better term. There's a lot of ways to get there, but I think most importantly is really looking at what needs maybe the emergency management department has, and offering where CERT can fit in, but making it talk about it with respect to collaboration and what the benefit CERT volunteers being used on task could bring to EMD. Don asked, do you have operational orders for advance notice events? No, I don't get a lot of advance notice event stuff. California, we can't predict earthquakes. And advance the closest, like on the disaster side, I don't have like a pre-established, here's what thou shalt do. My operational deployment model is a phone tree. Our volunteers are in our dispatch system, so they can see when we get calls, but they know not to respond to a call unless they're deployed. Operational orders for planned events like pub ed or first aid is be there, show up in uniform, and make sure we have all the supplies. But I do that in direct coordination with them. I don't have many op orders that exist, if any, for advanced events. Leonard asks, are the hours calculated per CERT volunteer or as a collective group? I try to keep them per volunteer. I just think that's important. And right now, since I've got such a smaller group functioning, it's a lot easier to manage. But it's presented as a collective. If we get them in front of council, I always present it both as specifically on the collective, and when we deploy CERT on disasters, I am always very quick to point out that the hours they put in will offset our cost share. So the work that they do in a large event that's gubernatorial recognized on a disaster, I can show the value of what they brought to the situation because our cost share is reduced. So the 70-25, 75 federal, 25 local, I can reduce that value. So I think it's important to capture it on an individual level. I like this from Bob. Bob, does your local emergency operations plan clearly define expectation of CERT roles in response or recovery? I'll probably get 1,000 thumbs down on this. No. My responsibility with respect to our volunteers is I am more a Semper Gumby when it comes to that. And by that, I mean, I want to be able to flex without and again, being a low hazard profile community, it's truly hard to say what their role would be. I will tell you that I communicate consistently that your role in a disaster goes back to basic. Take care of your family and your neighbors. If you don't get a call from me and you know the big one hit, you don't have to sit around twiddling your thumbs. Go forth and do what you were trained to do in a CERT basic class. There's no advanced expectation that you have to sit around and wait for me. You can do what we teach you, but I don't have them with a very specific role in our EOP. The flooding utilization is probably the closest to what you're asking about, Bob, and that was done based on an ask, not on a predefined role, because I always want to be respectful of like our public utilities department. I don't want to put the responsibility on my volunteer and then have my public utilities division say, hey, we don't need them. So yeah, I don't have anything pre-canned like that. Yeah. Anything from anybody else? Awesome. Well, I'll turn my camera on so you can see who I am. I'm glad to share anything of what we have vis-a-vis Michael, and if he wants to distribute it to the group, I can certainly share the presentation along with some of the documents that I have used in the past. I would just simply remind you, if you ever get documents from anybody, don't just do a search and replace. Make sure that you get the alignment of that document reflects what you're doing within the community, and it's been vetted through legal.
Thank you so much, Chad. That was a fantastic presentation, and you got a lot of questions at the end.
When you make as many mistakes as I have, it's not hard to get a lot of questions.
So I just wanted to go back on a couple of your slides. So you showed the retired ambulance that you were able to obtain, and here in Connecticut, we're under a different system. We don't have a county system. So we have 169 cities and towns, and we have 104 CERT teams. So everyone's their own entity. So that's what I manage here at the state level. So we do have some towns that were able to obtain a retired senior bus that they've made into a rehab van. Bring blankets. It could be a heating vehicle or a cooling vehicle. Bring Gatorade, things like that. What we get a lot here in Connecticut is a lot of our police departments are afraid to utilize CERT at traffic incidents or road closures because they feel they might be taking away positions or fulfilling another job. So we're trying to work through that. Any advice on getting through to our EMDs and our police chiefs and our fire chiefs to let CERT handle some of the intersections that may not be major during a activation?
It's a good question. So when it comes to that kind of philosophy, one of the things I like to go back to is I like to appeal to the the training investment that our chiefs have put into paid staff. So the support unit, as you asked, Michael, is a great example of that. And so when we began to go down that path, the communication that I had was to say, hey, look, why would you want the last firefighter that responds to the all call to come out to the multi-structure, the world's burning? Why do you want to take that resource that you have paid an obscene amount of money for training and everything else to drive an RV to the scene? That you're better off using your paid staff to function within that higher level of training that they've received. And so overcoming that, it was like telling the chief, hey, we have the capacity to do it. You're still going to need this many this many paid staff per how we deploy. So I'm not taking a job away. What I'm saying is now you have resources to do the job they're paid to do, which I have to be careful because I don't want the volunteers to feel like I'm somehow minimizing the work of picking up the support unit, because it's not. I'm just saying that form and function can be done better with a volunteer, and your firefighters will be happy because I can tell you the firefighter who was picking up the support unit hated it because they were the last person to pick up the phone. Okay, I'm on my way, blah, blah, blah. They didn't want to do it anyway. So I tried to appeal to the idea of you've invested time and energy into a public safety officer or public utilities. Let's put them doing that technical work because that's what the public expects.
I loved your section on stats and the value of CERT. That's sort of my pet project here, showing everybody that'll listen the value of CERT and how important CERT members are and the hours they put in. In our state, it's not a requirement. It's a hope you do it. We like an annual report. So we have 104 teams, and we only receive probably 50% of stats from our teams. How could we bolster that number? Because I'd really love to, make that pie chart that you had for Connecticut. The visual is fantastic, especially at a statewide level.
Sure. So if you have that many operational teams within the state, I would be turning to them and there's two things. One, is there somebody within that respective agency that enjoys data and analytics? Let's capitalize on that person, number one. Number two, and this is the evil draconian piece of that, is if you're going to get funding from the Fed to the state to the local, then there should be some, I'm not saying it has to be overcomplicated, but there has to be some tracking mechanism to say, hey, we gave you X, just show us what you did. Using that one person who enjoys doing it, who wants to be there, there has to be a carrot and a stick. And the carrot is there's more money coming. The stick is and the carrot also is capitalizing on that innate CERT members' desire. And then the stick is, hey, next year, programs that submitted some reports may have better funding opportunities. There's a question from Tad about working with teenagers in CERT basic training. What I mean is how to engage interested high schoolers. So when I had one of my CERT members was a teacher at one of our continuing education high schools. And that particular instructor was engaged in a way that she made doing CERT basic part of her curriculum throughout the year. Now, I will tell you that instructor has since left, so I don't have an active teen program like I used to, but there were 5 years where I was going with an active teen program, but it was the collaborative effort between myself, that instructor, and the school district at large. I didn't do more than help teach and provide logistical support to that effort. They did it on their own.
Here in Connecticut, we have two robust teen CERT programs. So in Connecticut, we have Title 28, which is liability. So that's for members over 18. Under 18, they're considered teen CERT, and we usually incorporate the teens with the Board of Ed who covers them, because a lot of our schools also act as shelters, so the students can respond to the school, be on Board of Ed property, and be covered. So we do have a couple schools that have a Team CERT program, and they incorporate it into like a public safety curriculum where they'll study fire, EMS, police, and then CERT, emergency management, and then some of the schools wrap it in even with weather. And they'll do a whole science and weather curriculum on snowstorms and hurricanes and things that we get out here. So we do have a couple programs, and we hope those students then transfer that into something public safety wise, or join their adult program in their town. So we do have a couple programs like that. Um, as far as showing the value of CERT, how can individual CERT team leaders show the value of CERT when it comes to, you know, budget meetings within their town? Because we have had some CERT teams start off with, the Homeland Security grant money, and then in a couple years after the town sees the value of CERT, that team is added in as a line item, maybe a couple $1,000s. So how do we get teams to make that pitch or show the town the value of CERT?
I think that's a collaborative effort. I think it has to be done with the sponsoring agency on the ground, both fire. If it's sponsored through fire law or EMS, taking that chief officer and making them that partner advocate alongside the volunteers. I think that's how you really begin to sell the outcomes and the value that CERT plays. Um, Testimonials from citizens that have been served by the program, any response data that you have, all of that into a simple one, hey, here's our annual report. That goes a long way towards science. So it's kind of a multi-pronged approach. I always have to have a chief that is passionate about it or appreciates it. I have to have a volunteer that I can hold up in front of a meeting and turn to and go, Amy, tell them why CERT's important. I have to have a community stakeholder like our rodeo association who can say, CERT comes out and does the first aid booth for us. So it's not necessarily always in that public forum of a meeting. Sometimes it's equally or even more important when we're operating out there and we're building that support with those partnerships, because members of our rodeo association have the ear of my council member. My fire chief has the ear of council. My business development department, or chamber of commerce, I should say, has the ear of the community at large. So those are those opportunities. Using those organic forms of communication really can help set you up for a better public meeting, because they're going to have heard about it anecdotally already. So I would look for it as a kind of a multi-pronged approach, as opposed to just this, hey, trying to get in as a line item, making that singular attack to your governing body. You need that organic conversation happening out there in the community. And I can tell you right now, I have to fix the organic conversation that's happening in my community, because I've got volunteers that are disgruntled, and rightfully so. I get it.
Any other questions from anybody? We had a great turnout today. I know it's 3 p.m. on the East Coast, or 4:30 on the East Coast now. So Chad, we started these webinars 3 years ago, and I was doing them quarterly, and then we went to bi-monthly, and then this year we're going monthly, and we're doing half of them at 3 p.m. Eastern, and then half of them 7 p.m. Eastern, to reach different audiences. Who's raised their hand here? Hal, did you have a question?
Me? Hello?
Yes, we do. Yep.
Okay. Hi, Chad. Good to see you again. I think you presented at the National CERT Association conference last year. So I had a question as being the state CERT coordinator. A couple items. Number one is the summary reports that you talked about being generated by the programs, and also what is the support factor from the state CERT coordinator with California, because in my case, I try to get to whatever events I can, show support. I'm at graduations, also assisting on the administrative level and requested needs and so forth. So I'm just curious because I think of the state CERT coordinator as being a great support arm, like Michael would be in his jurisdiction, his state, but also within Nevada. I try to be able to show support as much as I can for the programs. We have approximately 6 programs in the state. We don't have a lot of programs, and so, like I said, that seems to be a valuable asset. So I was curious on the interface you have with the state.
It's a good question. So the interaction we have with our state CERT coordinator, Suva Tai, is great. I love the guy. I consider him a close personal friend. We've trained together. We've gone out and but that role has changed over time too, Hal, because his position keeps getting reallocated within the state system, and where he started in Cal Volunteers, which was a very clean role back to the CERT world. Now he's housed in the California Office of Emergency Services, and his scope of responsibility is much larger. So we've had to adapt at the local level or wherever the programs are sponsored, and realize he's not always going to respond to every email. He's not going to respond to every text message that I send him. But the relationship is still there. There's just a mutual respect. And I will be honest with you, there are times where I will do more asking for forgiveness as opposed to asking for permission. But I think too, outside of that role, if you have a CERT state coordinator who maybe has more broad tasks outside of CERT, the CERT coordinator can help by facilitating those interpersonal relationships with the local programs. There are a lot of us now that there's group texts on my phone right now with local programs where it's like, hey, this is going on. What's going on here? Have you heard that? Keeping that organic ground level as opposed to state level. Again, nothing against state CERT coordinators, but sometimes when their roles change, we have to flex and adapt. So we've maintained it, but we've also recognized his role has changed over time, and we've adapted to that.
I appreciate that. Yeah, I'm one of many hats, but I try to sparse my time so I can be able to put forth the support that the programs and be able to address some of the needs that they have. So I appreciate your input. Thank you very much.
Absolutely.
And the folks out here who believe that their state CERT coordinator is, this is their singular role. It's not for many of us, and me included. My leadership here has been fantastic. There's some weeks where it's 70% of my time, and there's some weeks where it's 10%. So it all depends on what I'm doing as far as projects. I do, school safety tabletops. We put on FEMA Basic Academies here. So we have a lot of things in the background, but we always try to keep CERT at the forefront because we know it's important. And putting out these webinars and getting folks from across the nation to attend is fantastic. So there's one more question that just came in. I'll let you take it, Chad.
Sure. So Bob asked, when performing one of your programs or deployments, how often do you rely on mutual aid from other CERT teams? So in California, there are only a handful of CERT teams that are mutual aid deployable. And this is going to go back in time. But back when we had the governor, Arnold Schwarzenegger, he put out there some training and master mutual aid agreements that very certain counties and highly concentrated down in the southern part of our state, they did a lot of that. I don't deploy CERT members across any jurisdictional boundary outside of Clovis. I just don't have the authority, nor do I have the legal protections that I would be comfortable with putting them in that situation. And I will tell you, Bob, I had a situation during the Creek Fire back in 18, or it might have been even COVID, I can't remember. I had volunteers calling me, Chad, we can see the smoke. We know it's up the hill. It's like 15 minutes away by drive. Get us out there. And I had to keep telling them, no, I can't. That is a county level responsibility. I don't have a means of protecting you. You have innate desires and a want to do good things. I just can't put you on scene. And I actually had a member quit. Literally said, well, since you can't put me on the Creek Fire, I'm going to find a different way to get there. I'm out. Okay, I'm sorry. And I have to respect that. And I don't do it in a methodology that is disrespectful or devaluing of what they want to do, but they have to appreciate the constraints that I'm under. And for them, it sounds like bureaucracy speak in their ears, and I get it. At the same time, I have to, their safety is first and foremost.
Here in Connecticut, our teams can respond and help out a neighboring town. It's just that the EMD from the town A that needs the help needs to reach out to town B, to their EMD, and let them know, and then an activation is done. So the town that's responding secondary just needs to push through that activation. So, and we have a lot of regional teams here too. We have teams that only, town can only provide 2 or 3 volunteers at a time. So we'll put together a regional team. So we're hoping to grow those. And we're also trying to work across state lines for the first time, possibly with Rhode Island and Connecticut. We have a couple of towns that border Rhode Island, and Rhode Island just has a few teams. So we're trying to see if we can establish some SOPs for Connecticut folks to respond to Rhode Island, and Rhode Island folks to respond to Connecticut. So I'm very big with education. So whenever we have, FEMA courses or some L courses that we offer here at Demis, to the 2300s or even the 300, we did have a student, Bob, who is on this call here today, finished our FEMA Basic Academy, and has, completed that and taken HC to a next level, created his own tabletop for his town. What types of education do you provide, or do you suggest for CERT teams to take? Because I'm always getting calls and emails on what to offer, and I'm just running out of ideas.
A couple. So there's the ICS classes that they can take through what's been relabeled the Emergency Management University. I can't remember the latest thing they've thrown on. I think it's the Emergency Management. You can take those ICS independent study courses. I think those are really helpful. 1, 2, 7, 8. I think too, the courses that are offered through other community partners, AED certification, CPR courses offered through the Red Cross. I think those are important. I like the idea of putting somebody through the NEMA Academy. I think that has huge value. I would just caution that if we're going to extend that level of education, knowing what the outcome is we want from that volunteer at the end, so they know going into it with what they're going to do relative to the world at the end. A lot of there are other classes I would encourage people to take. If you can ever get involved in a general plan update for your community, it sounds weird, but the general plan, David asked what the NEMA Academy is. The National Emergency Management Association. It's through Emmitsburg, and the academy, they have the basic, advanced, and I think it's at the executive now, Michael. Mm-hmm. Yeah. There's 3 different levels, and when you get out of there, you've essentially gone through the full spectrum of emergency management, planning, response. You end up writing a paper. It's pretty intense, which is what that is. But back to your question, Michael, the being involved in other components so that they see where emergency management and CERT fits within the bigger scale of local and county government, I think would be helpful. I think in cases for some CERT members, taking grant writing classes would be helpful, because if fiscal and fiduciary issues are a constant, which I feel like in most jurisdictions they are, okay, I only have so much general fund dollars I can throw at you. But if you think that the grant world is ripe with opportunity, then take a grant writing class, so that you can help me out. You know, if you have this new advanced activity that we want to do, and I'm telling you I don't have the money, well, take a grant class. So I think getting involved in other parts of the community as well. Like I said, we're going through a general plan update right now, which defines the scope of what the city's going to look like in the future. I'd love to have a CERT member on there. I think, again, these aren't classes necessarily, but some fire departments and law enforcement agencies adopt what's called standards of cover or do strategic planning. I have put CERT members on our strategic planning committee for our fire department because, one, they've already demonstrated a vested interest in the fire service, and two, they have an understanding of it. So when we develop what we're going to look like into the future, now they've had a hand on it and can get involved and feel like, okay, it wasn't, CERT led me to this. And there's just a lot of different opportunities out there. So I would look at ICS courses for classroom type stuff, but I would look at, the community at large and where we can have force multipliers plugged in different ways.
Yeah, we try to offer and try to guide people in the right direction, especially with the Red Cross and their fundamentals of sheltering courses. Serve Safe, that's one of the courses we'll cover. Ham radio, we have one or two teams with the police department. They have become drone pilots, and they've helped out in that aspect. We have some horseback riding members and animal rescue. I think we have a bike team or two. So yeah, we try to share the wealth as far as what folks can do and what their towns will allow as far as that. Um, just one more question from me. You talked about your CERT basic class. I know we can't change the curriculum, but have you added modules that are specific to your part of the country, and or would any of those modules be considered for our part of the country?
The only modules that I've added are the hazard specific annexes that are out there. So in my class, the night one, when we do disaster prep, I cover earthquakes, I cover flooding, I cover extreme heat. But beyond that, I try to not overdo a CERT basic class by doing too much more than what's already there, because I'm still in that back to basics mode. Now, I will be honest with you, I do include slides in there when we talk about reorienting the deck, because the basic deck is dry and boring. When I talk disaster prep, or when I am sitting there trying to think about how do I keep members engaged, my photos are always of local events and local volunteers having done stuff. So I'm on the one hand, I'm talking about disaster prep, but I'm doing the hook of, and here's some ways CERT has been engaged. So the architecture is designed to complement. I don't do a lot of additional supplementing. I just put photos in there that anchor my presentation to give me a talking point outside of the basic. But beyond that, no, I don't do too much else.
Yeah, we ask when we do our train the trainers here, we ask people to insert photos of their community or local Connecticut photos so that it's Connecticut size. We're not gonna have an earthquake like magnitudes out here like you guys, or the wildfires pictures. But we want snowstorms, we want hurricanes, we want
Right.
hurricanes. Yeah. So, all right. Does anyone else have any questions? This was a fantastic webinar. Um, just want to thank Chad for joining us and being one of the first to commit when I sent out the schedule. Much appreciated. I hope I see you in Irvine in August.
I'll be
It's
there.
going to be a good conference. So we'll wrap it up. Thanks to Chad for a great webinar. Chad, if you want to send me any handouts, I will include it in their slide deck with my update. And I'll also attach it to their CT Train account so that when they log in to get their certificate, they can download any of your documents that you send me. And to everyone else, thank you so much for attending. If you would like a certificate for this program, go back to your CT Train account, fill out that eval that's required, and then you get your certificate. And this webinar will be posted on our CT YouTube channel. CT CERT YouTube channel. Hopefully in the next few days when I can get some time to edit it and post it. So thank you very much, everyone, and be
Thank you.
safe. And we'll see you next month.